This may be one of the most expensive computer cases you could buy. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to episode 2 of the RCPC series. This series, Matt and I have taken Tamiya 1/14 tractor and trailer combos, and we're turning them into custom gaming computers. Now, for this series, we partnered with both Tamiya and EVGA. Tamiya supplied the truck and trailer combo, and then EVGA provided a bunch of computer hardware to pack into these to finish out the oddest PC or weirdest RC that I've ever built. Now, in the first video, we had the trailer partially assembled, and then I showed you a few of the steps that we went through to get the PC started, as far as some of the construction methods I was using to build the PC case. Now, part of this series is that in the end, it needs to be inconspicuous. It can't just look like a PC inside of a model semi-trailer. So that is going to continue to evolve. But for now, we're working on the design and how I'm getting everything mounted within. Because even though it needs to be kind of covert, I want to be able to display it and have it look interesting and designed and engineered on the inside when it's time to open it up. Now, in the last video though, I hadn't started on the tractor portion at all, but here in front of you, you'll see my custom King hauler. The parts that I decided to change out is that I bought myself a new set of frame rails. Now, these frame rails are just like the stock ones, except they're about 6 inches longer, moving the rear axles further away from the back of the cab, giving it that stretched look that I actually really like in the full-size world of semis. I enjoy that look. I think it looks cool. And while I was at that, I picked up the Tamiya Grand Hauler rear fenders to replace the smaller chrome versions that come with the King Hauler. Now, if you're not from the RC world and you don't know, this is a fully functioning RC model with a multi-speed transmission that sits underneath and an electronic package called the Tamiya Multifunction Control Unit. And what that unit does, it is the electronic speed control, so it controls the actual motor output, and it also has a sound and light unit built in. So it's got a speaker unit that sits on the inside of the cab here, and it replicates motor sounds, brake sounds, air brakes, disconnects, all kinds of different operations. And then it also controls the lighting for the vehicle. This vehicle has LED lights in almost all of the right places: headlights, fog lights, auxiliary lights, turn signals, brake lights. In addition to the lighting and sound, there's also a small motor with an off-balanced weight attached to it that's a vibration motor. That actually gives the whole truck a shake to it, just like an idling diesel engine in a tractor like this would have. The build of this semi was very enjoyable. It took me maybe 15 hours or so to actually build it, and then the paint job on this, for me, a little bit of a stretch, but I got it done and it actually turned out pretty well. I used Tamiya's primer, their orange paint, and then a pearl clear coat on top of it. After I finished that, I also added the factory Tamiya graphics to the side. And I think that the cream and gold combo works pretty well on the orange paint that I chose here. Now, this truck isn't done. There's still a number of things that I'd like to do. I've got custom stacks coming for it. I also want to do a boxed frame cover that's paint matched to the body. And then there's a few other things that I may do, including front rear bumpers and possibly some aluminum wheels just to kind of finish it out. Now, I have built other Tamiya 3-speeds in the past, like the high lift, but this truck, in the process of building it, enjoyed it way more than I really thought that I would. I thought that the detail of this whole model would get very tedious, but as it went, I just enjoyed it more and more until it was done. This model is not as in-depth of a build as the model that Matt chose. The King Hauler is an older model compared to Matt's. It doesn't have as many of the details as that Mercedes that he picked, but I think that the style of this is unmatched. He can weather away at that Merc all he wants, but old school American style will always win. But all of the work that went into the tractor was just a distraction from the work that really needed to get done in the trailer. So let's jump over to that for now. Now, since you saw this trailer last, there has been more work done. Up here, we've got 1/2 of the 2 panels that will line this side of the trailer. Now, the details that we have here is this window here is supposed to be the viewing window for the motherboard, kind of see what's going on inside. However, after getting it installed and then seeing the motherboard in place with the PCI extension cable and how it's going to have to wrap around, I decided to make an adjustment in the model, and I've moved this window up. So now that the top side of the window is going to be in line with the top of this window on this side. I think that's going to look better. You won't see as much PCI extension cable, and you'll see more of what's important towards the top of the motherboard. The nice thing about this all being designed in CAD and having my CNC router here is that I can make these changes and it only costs me a couple of dollars in ABS. But back to this window on the front. That is actually for this 7-inch TFT monitor. I believe I mentioned this in the first video, but now we actually have the mounting place where it will live. My first 3D printed bezel wasn't quite right, so that's gonna have to get scrapped, a little bit of the design change, and then reprinted, but the monitor itself still fits. With the monitor in place here, you can see how it will fit. The point of the 3D printed bezel is actually to move the monitor back a little bit from the side panel. That way, when the outside cover is on, to kind of put this into undercover mode, it's not rubbing against that display. This monitor is powered by USB and it's got an HDMI in. I also picked up an HDMI splitter so that I can have the HDMI going to either the monitor or the projector. And then I still have a display port out on the graphics card, which I can run to another jack that will be able to hook up to an external monitor. That way I can have one or the other going, as well as a secondary or more high resolution display for actual use of a PC. One other detail that I put into this side panel is I milled my crown logo into the bottom corner there. I've got that backed with a piece of copper just for a little bit of color or texture. That might be left open. Maybe I'll put some plexiglass there, some Lexan frosted of some sort. If I add RGB in here at all, it would help, kind of illuminate that and show it a little more. For now, I just threw a piece of metal in to back it to give it some depth. In the last episode, I did talk about the mounting of the GPU. Now again, we're using 2060 KOs from EVGA, and my initial plan was to match the angle of the motherboard and PSU and mount the GPU at a 45-degree angle. Since then though, my plans have changed and I've adjusted my thoughts on that. Now I had my concerns about the output cables and trying to make sure that there was room to get them out of the bottom of the GPU and then route them back to the components that were necessary. And that wasn't my main factor in why I decided to change my mind, but it was part of it. Just trying to make things easier on myself. So what I did is I designed up the second half of this panel to rotate the actual GPU, and it's going to be mounted more in this fashion. So it's going to sit here up against the face of the trailer. Not actually against the face, but kind of against the face. Now I modeled up this GPU in Fusion 360 just so I had an accurate model to base the design that I was going for off of. And after putting the GPU in place and then starting to sketch out my new design, I got that finished up and programmed to cut on my CNC router. And then tonight before the video, I made the cuts to get that completed, and this is what we're working with. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the trailer partially disassembled so that I can get this piece dropped in and we can start to see what the trailer is going to look like on one side. I also have some 3D printed companion parts that go with that side panel, and those are going to provide the actual mounting surfaces for the GPU, as well as some other areas to kind of help the look that I'm going for. You'll see that I've got bolts going all the way around the GPU. Now, really only the bottom 4 are needed. The top 4, you could argue, are helpful or could be needed, but the ones around the outside are just to complete the look. So I'm going to start prepping these 3D printed parts. In the last video, I did a little bit of a time lapse, but basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a 3mm tap through the pre-designed holes that I put in these parts, just to make sure that when you're putting the 3mm screws in, you don't start to grab too much plastic and just strip out the hole. We're gonna do that on all 4 of these parts that hold the GPU. And lastly, I've got this connector piece, which is going to help me tie in this new rear panel and the front panel that we previously did. I'm excited to get this panel mounted into the trailer and start seeing what all of the components in their place are going to look like. We still have a lot of details to get through, but getting all of the components hard mounted, kind of step number one. Well, sometimes things just work out all right. The panel fit perfectly. My overall dimension was spot on. I was worried about the tolerances of the first panel plus the second panel all stacking up to be a little bit too much and everything not bolting in, but wasn't the case. My gaps were perfect. All of my 3D printed parts lined up right as I expected, and the GPU mount worked the first time. So I had those outer rings, and those kind of helped to space off the GPU a little bit, or at least keep it consistent. There is a bit of a gap between the outside panel and the GPU itself, so there's a little bit of a possibility for airflow from each side to enter, but for the most part, there's going to be that outer panel that goes on here, and even if that panel is on, I'm going to perforate the design over top of the GPU so that if this thing is functioning in its closed up position, at least the GPU will be able to breathe through those decorative outside panels. Now, currently, I've got two PCI Express extension cables stacked together to get to where I need to for the GPU. I need to figure out what cable is going to be best for me in this situation. If I have to spend the 75 plus bucks to get one of the extra long flexible ones, so be it. I'm just hoping that I can find one that's a little bit less expensive, but we'll see what it takes. At this point, it just kind of is what it is, and we're gonna have to get what we need to get this project done. Now, at this point, we have one panel left here on the rear side and the back half to finish the design of. It doesn't actually have any components specifically planned for it to house within the panel. So the design of it is kind of up in the air, and it doesn't really need to be anything specific at this point. Now, this area in the back of this panel that I just kind of made a couple of cuts, I don't necessarily love that. There's not anything that I was going for. I was just making something to try and make it look a little bit more visual appealing at this point. Now, I might put in a frosted plexiglass like I talked about with the area where my logo is. Who knows? Maybe a colored version. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. And just kind of one of those things that we'll see how the final look of this really continues to evolve as we go. So at this point, we do have all of the major components into the trailer. So at this point now, I can start routing the cables from that 550 GM EVGA PSU in and figure out how they're going to go. If I want to make any additional parts to help with my cable management and keep this as clean as possible, that's something else that needs to get tackled now, so I can figure out if I need to integrate any additional mounting places into these panels before I decide if I need to make final versions. For this front one, I know that I'm going to make some adjustments to the window area, so we already know we're going to remake that one. This rear side over here, I need to adjust the position of the holes around the projector, so we're going to have to remake that. And then, of course, the final panel in the back. Iterative design process to make sure that everything ends up exactly how we planned it. We still have to make the mounts for the keyboard and mouse and all of that I want to add in this back portion, so if I need to add an additional mount, we're gonna have to remake that one as well. It's a good thing that a 4x8 sheet of ABS was cheap. Now, putting this all together in one unit, it doesn't even fit within my camera view. This thing, tip to tail, is 61 inches long from the front bumper of the King Hauler to the back bumper of this trailer. The 6-inch stretch on the frame rails of the truck, obviously not helping things, but you know, I think that the overall look, once we have this thing outside, that's really going to be when this pays off. Now, we already have the paint job done on the truck. The trailer is a whole nother thing. Once we have the final layout of the trailer done, basically the whole thing has to get disassembled again, because I'm going to paint the trailer. I'm going to get these aluminum rails on the box. I'm going to get those painted in black. A lot of these, gray molded components also going to get painted in black. I've got to get the reefer unit modified for proper intake from that AIO that lives in the front of this. If you didn't see the first episode, there's a 120 millimeter AIO that lives in the front of this trailer that will have an intake through the fake reefer unit that sits on the front of this trailer. And then once I get all of those trailer components painted and detailed, the final outside skin that will go on the trailer body itself is going to get a printed wrap. And that's a whole nother project, as I need to come up with the design that will be on it. It's going to feature Tamiya and EVGA, of course, but I want to make it kind of flow with the look of the truck. And I would like to have it kind of tie into some sort of theme or reference from who knows what. So thinking to do on that still. Lots of fabrication still to do. Lots of CAD design that still needs to get done before this thing is complete. Matt has shared a bunch of progress with me on his truck, so you have to go check that out. But he's doing a lot of very detailed weathering to make the truck and trailer fit the Cyberpunk 2077 theme, and that is going to look fantastic. I'm definitely leaning more on the engineering side than I am on my ability to add any sort of realistic weathering by hand painting. So us both leaning on our strengths, nothing new. So I don't think that this challenge will surprise anybody who's watched our channels in the past. Hopefully in the next episodes of this, you'll see these PCs coming to life, hopefully being able to fire up, testing all of the components that we add into here. I imagine that we'll be getting close to the final configurations and looks of what the trailers will have. My truck still has some custom detail parts to get added to it, but those are pretty simple, something I'm more than comfortable with doing. The PC is where obviously the time is going to be needed for me to focus and get this project that is a little bit more outside of my typical wheelhouse completed. But I am super excited to drive my PC around and play some games on my RC. It's an oddball project that I'm really enjoying, and it is coming together along the lines of how I envisioned. And I'm not sure that that vision was super clear to people when we posted the first video, but hopefully this starts to paint the picture more clearly for you guys, and hopefully it keeps your interest. So make sure you watch out for the next episode of the RCPC. Again, Matt and I will be posting the next episodes at the same time, so you can follow along with both of us as we progress through these projects. As always, hit the like button if you enjoy these videos, subscribe if you're not already, hit the notification bell so you see the RCPC videos as soon as they get uploaded. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.